On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, MC Hammer re-enters the lexicon after about 30 years. I'll explain how that's going to happen coming up in just a second with our friend Katie Heindl from Diamond Basketball Feelings. Thanks so much for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1306 of Locked On Raptors for Wednesday, December the 21st. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all of my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can find the show as well over there at Locked On Raptors. And you can follow, subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on your favorite podcast apps. As always, we are also on YouTube, so you can go support the show that way. It's much appreciated when you take the time. You don't even have to watch the videos. Just hit the subscribe button, leave your videos running on mute in the background, juice the stats. That's all I ask. That's my holiday gift from you to me. Thank you very much. And also thank you to BetterHelp. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, on today's show, You a fan of the song "Can't Touch This"? It's the conceit of the whole episode. As I promised, MC Hammer back in the general popular culture for the first time in ages because of this here podcast. So you're welcome, MC Hammer. On today's show, we are going to play a game called "Can't Touch This," where with the trade vulture circling the conversations about blowing it up, and OG and Pascal and Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. all getting shipped out to tear it all down to the studs. We're going to go through the Raptors roster, determine just how untouchable each player on the team is on a scale of can't touch this to furry wall, which of course is from the other very popular pop culture thing, Get Him to the Greek, with Jonah Hill and Russell Brand, that movie everybody's seen, so you know what I'm talking about. Furry wall, very touchable, very nice when you're on a Jeffrey. Can't touch this, MC Hammer. Can't touch the dude, he's dancing too hard in those Zubaz pants. Everything in between is available on our little fake spectrum as well. And here to play this silly game with me, as she is usually here to do, is Katie Heindl. Katie, how's it going?
It's going good. I can't say that I got the reference to the wall when you texted me this. I just thought about it for a minute and was like, yeah, I guess that sounds nice.
Yeah. I would posit that I've seen the film Get Him to the Greek more than 99% of the population of the earth. It's not even an especially good movie. It's just, I have this routine, Katie. It's very silly. You probably are aware, as like a freelance sports media person, tax time can be a bit of a nightmare. It's lots of different, varied income sources, and did I pay tax on that, and blah, 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 blah. It's boring, but I have a ritual every January when I sit down to do my taxes. I put on Get Him to the Greek as my background movie because I don't really care about it. It's just there. I can look up and laugh once in a while when P. Diddy appears on the screen, or Jonah Hill makes a comment or barfs. And it's just like my background soundtrack to doing taxes. It's a weird little thing I do, but I've seen it, 10 years in a row now. It's strange. Either way, the concept in that movie is there's a scene where there's a furry wall, they're doing drugs, and Jonah Hill's freaking out, and Russell Brand says, "Stroke the furry wall, and it'll make you feel better." And it does, and it turns into a Russell Brand song later on. Very stupid conceit of this episode, but basically, we're trying to determine who is untouchable on the Raptors team, who is not, and put it onto a little sliding scale. Katie, are you ready to play Can't Touch This?
Yeah.
All right. I will not dance in Zubaz pants on this podcast, I promise. Unless you want me to. Maybe I will. All right. I have to acquire some Zubaz first. Maybe I'll have it for the next edition of this after it's a ringing success. Let's begin, Katie, with Pascal Siakam, shall we? He's very good, of course. He's the best player on the Raptors. He's one of the 15 best players in the entire NBA. As I have already kind of spoiled, if you're worried about what I'm going to say here on the podcast this week, I don't think you trade Pascal Siakam. He's really freaking good. He's the kind of player you tank, hoping to get, and probably will never achieve. Katie, I have to ask you, the trade vultures are circling. In theory, plenty of teams out there could really use a Pascal Siakam. But for you, if you're the Raptors front office, just how untouchable is Pascal Siakam? Is he the MC Hammer of the Toronto Raptors?
Completely, but I would also argue the conceit of the trade vultures circling is because of the possibility of somebody like Pascal and someone else who I'm sure we're going to get to next being available, which is what I find so funny about the blow it up conversation when it's coming from outside the house, as it were.
Yeah. So you're fully he's in the can't touch this. Is your guys' pants
I mean, if you're really scale? Like, we want to be uncompetitive. We want to lose games for the next 5 seasons. Worse, we want to be worse than we are now. Sure, you can trade Pascal.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no.
Yeah. There's this whole thing with Pascal. It's gone back the last couple years. It's resurfaced in sort of the nitty-gritty corners of Raptors fandom the last week or so, where there's this sort of idea that, well, because Pascal Siakam isn't one of the 7 best players alive, one of the 7 players alive who can actually carry a team to like legit contention essentially on their own every year, that somehow means you shouldn't have him on your team. That has always been incredibly stupid to me. Even if he is in theory a number 2 at his very peak on the best version of the Raptors, just because you have the number 2 before you had the number 1 doesn't mean you trade the number 2. That's stupid. That's a way to set yourself up to be the Orlando Magic or the Sacramento Kings or any of these other teams that just trade away good players, hoping and praying that the lottery balls will be in their favor. I also think with Pascal, there's such a you can't not sort of think about the sort of franchise legacy stuff with him too. And to me, Katie, Pascal feels like there's a very real path here for him being like the closed loop on Raptors history and their sort of relationships with star players. You start off early in the days, Damon Stoudemire's out in 2.5 years. Vince Carter finds his way out in 6 years. Chris Bosh, it seems like, hey, maybe we got a thing going here, and then he leaves for Miami. Eventually, they kind of move into this next phase. They bring in Kyle Lowry from outside. They kind of bring him into the system. He grows up. He is the forever Raptor, who was not a forever Raptor, obviously. He spent 6 years before even coming to Toronto, kind of toiling around the league and figuring his way. But he gets to Toronto. He becomes that sort of great star relationship success story. DeMar DeRozan feels like he's going to be that guy. They have to move him ultimately to go and win the championship. Pascal Siakam feels like the very first guy who could be a forever Raptor and kind of be that last step as a franchise of, oh yeah, we just have this guy who's ours. He's been here forever. He's so sort of emblematic of a lot of the stuff that has made the Raptors successful, from the development to the constant year-over-year improvement to the way that the team is built around him. It would feel to me just like a real cheap shot at a fan base that has gotten to learn and grow and love a guy, just to ship him off because the team has lost 6 games in a row or because the team is not perceived to be a title winner. If you have Pascal Siakam on your team, you're going to be good. Right now, it's not happening because he's got no help. But if you give him a reasonable supporting cast, there's going to be a baseline of quality for this team, and that matters. I know everyone's title or bust. You're not competing for a championship, then you're trash. That's stupid. That's just not the way it works in pro sports. There's going to be a lot of teams that are left disappointed. And if you are sitting there, like as a fan, thinking, well, if they're not the one team at the end still standing, then it's a disappointment. I think you're doing it wrong, frankly. And Siakam, to me, is just like, there's too much baked into his time with the team and all of this. He just feels like he should be a forever Raptor to me. If he's not agitating to go, there is no way you touch him. He's full on MC Hammer. Can't touch this, Katie. Anything to add?
Nope.
All right then, fine. We'll continue on. Rant over. Next, coming up, we're gonna get into OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Nick Nurse, a whole bunch of other guys. We'll get to that in just 1 second here with Katie Heindl. Before we do that, however, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, it's a difficult time. The seasonal affective disorders seeping in. There's the weight of a new year coming, and unfortunately, life doesn't have a user manual for you to figure out difficult emotions that come with the time of year, that come with anything. Life is a lot at all times, not just this time of year. Navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change, a new relationship, becoming a parent, or just stuff that you're kind of dealing with internally. But therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, 100% online. Whether or not you've been to therapy, or whether it's your first time diving in, whether it is something that you've done before but maybe lost touch with, BetterHelp is a wonderful entry point back into the world of talking about yourself with someone who's there to listen. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people once again with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, 100% online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, we continue on here with Katie Heindl, digging into the untouchability rankings of the Toronto Raptors. We just went through Pascal Siakam, as I kind of lost my mind a little bit. Let's go now to OG Anunoby, Katie, who we talked about this yesterday. Zach Lowe on his podcast on Friday mentioned that if OG Anunoby were to be put on the trade market, or I guess this is on Monday. I don't know what day it is. I keep thinking it's Thursday. Holidays. But either way, the recent podcast Zach Lowe did with Ian Begley talked about how if the Raptors were to go and fetch a haul for OG Anunoby, it would be a pretty substantial one, on par with what maybe the Cavs dished out for Donovan Mitchell. That feels like wishful thinking to me a little bit, but either way, Katie, OG Anunoby, he's going to be a guy everybody wants, which, as I made the point yesterday, maybe you should keep the guy that the entire league is falling over themselves to get. That seems like clue one that you've got something pretty cool on hand. But where are you at with OG Anunoby in the range from furry wall to can't touch this and the untouchability of one OG?
I mean, I think like the comparison to someone like Mitchell is interesting, but I do think like trades are so contingent on one, what players are available like at that time, who's desperate enough, right? Like basically how things fall. It's not all just, I think, on the player getting traded, because we've seen trades that like don't make any sense. I would like look back as recently as this past summer to a lot of the trades that felt extremely lopsided to me because it was just where the league was and where teams were in terms of like their desperation levels. So that said, like, yeah, I do think he would. It's so gross to talk about this stuff.
It sure
so you're
is.
like, oh, he'd get you a lot. Like he'd return you a lot. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure
the nomenclature needs some work.
Yeah, like the trade stakes would be what you wanted, if you're in the Raptors front office. But I don't really see the point of it because to me, we're talking about like players kind of year one and year two. I don't know that maybe Pascal and OG are both twos. Maybe they'll become 1 and 2. But I think for this is the first season that you've had OG. I'm so scared to like jinx it. Healthy and playing, and like then you see immediately how he starts to play. Yeah. When he has that time and that clearance. And like this is the first time you're seeing it in his entire career with the Raptors. Why would you? Then you're like, nah, right. I get it in a very cold-blooded way, because you're like, well, we'll capitalize on now because he is someone who we haven't seen this from yet, and we don't know what the future holds. It's true of, but I mean, it's true of any athlete. But I get it. I just still don't agree with it. So to me, very untouchable. I'd say like probably on par with Pascal.
Yeah, I think for me, if we got the spectrum, there's can't touch this all the way on the far end. It's like one rung just to the left of that, or I don't know how we're doing the directions here. It's different on video. But either way, for me, the artificial rung on this sort of spectrum he falls is Jurassic Park. Let me explain. In the film Jurassic Park, John Hammond goes on this big rant about how I just wanted to build this thing that people could see and touch and be there. And it was all well and good, a very nice idea to sort of make this accessible, natural wonder for people to come and see. Problem is, careful what you wish for, because if you do make it touchable, it might eat you. My thinking here is if you trade OG Anunoby, again, a player that the entire league is lusting after because he's the exact type of player that every team needs, that's the kind of trade that you regret for like 20 years and sit there thinking, man, wouldn't it be nice if the Raptors didn't have a hole at small forward for the last 20 years? And wouldn't it have been nice if there's a guy like OG on the team? A guy like OG is so rare in the NBA that trading a guy like that feels like completely insane to me. Like, I know you might get the whole pick haul and all that stuff. You will probably never get a player like OG Anunoby with any of those picks that you receive. And when you do kind of get back into the next phase of your competitive cycle, which in theory could be as early as next season, you're sitting there wondering, man, it would be really cool if we had that guy on our team. Like, it just feels like a trade you will instantly regret. And so while I understand the idea of like, oh, if this massive offer comes in, you have to consider it, I still think it's the kind of thing where you're going to regret it big time, much like John Hammond regretted building the Isla Nublar compound, which
you
for
left
30
out
years has just caused dinosaurs to run havoc across the earth. Bad news. Don't do it.
The best thing about that analogy you left off, which is that then he becomes the thing that's coming to eat you.
Yeah.
When he plays against your team, which I'm sure he would have even like more reason for if his name's kind of been floated. This is like probably the second or third time. It's not verging on Miles Turner territory, but it's getting there, you know?
Yeah.
He's got a lot of reasons, I think, then to show you what you're missing.
The thing that I struggle with there, Katie, is that like I feel like it's never come from inside the house. It's always been like other people being like, wouldn't it be cool if the Raptors traded us OG and then passing it off as a rumor?
I mean, all of this is, right? Like all of this is. It doesn't like benefit. I think like at least for the two guys we've just talked about, the front office understands very well what they have. There's no need to create rumors, right? There's no need to leak anything because you can see what happens is like you've got media and other teams and fans. Everybody just does it on their own.
The sickos will do the work for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go to Scottie Barnes, Katie. I think an interesting one here. Yesterday on the show, Big V and I were kind of chatting, and he brought up the idea that while it's not there yet, the sort of lack of development this season maybe sort of makes you have to have a meeting if you're the front office, discussing the idea of whether you can marry the Scottie Barnes timeline with the Pascal Siakam timeline. I still think you can. I think the idea that you can't have players who are different ages on basketball teams is stupid. But, you know, I can see where Big V's coming from there, at least, as far as like doing your due diligence in the front office to answer or ask that question. So Scottie Barnes, Katie, from furry wall to can't touch this, where does he slot in?
Well, dude, like I'm not with Vivek on that one. And I'm frankly like a bit pissed off at like, the conversations around the quote lack of development for Scottie Barnes. Like I just don't see it. I also don't know what you expected. Right?
He's 21. It's 21. It's hard. The NBA is really hard.
When you blow through expectations the way that he did last season, you don't necessarily have expectations set because of how he blew through those. This season, they are having conversations with him. We don't know what they are. So what they're asking of him, maybe he's doing all of those things. Maybe there are internal like check boxes he's been marking off. Like where you see him struggle, and I've said this before, but like where we're seeing him struggle this season on the defensive end. These are things that because these are the tasks that he's been asked to take on more of. He's been asked to take on more responsibility in these areas, and that's where he's struggling. To me, that's a good thing. You don't get better automatically. You have to get better by getting worse sometimes. So I think like you also have the timeline of the NBA and the season. It's December.
30 games. Yeah. It's so like to make any grand
like,
decisions is insane right now.
No, like, and also just like his brain needs time to pick all these things that he's learning in real time and put them together. And because you only have a game to kind of put them to practice, in practices he's great because that's not the point. It's like when you have the external pressures of a game and like the real time action, and you actually have to rely on your decision making, which you're still working at. Like that's where you're seeing him struggle. But again, I would be more worried if he was just kind of like complacent and relying on the things that we saw him do last season, which was so much fun to watch. And I get maybe the pining for for that like joy and the feeling of that. It was a lot of fun, but to just hold him there would be very detrimental to his development too. So I'm kind of just like, I mean, I get this. This is just an impatient thing.
Yeah.
But to then toss his name to be like, well, he's a bust. I haven't seen that word going around, but like it feels very close to getting there.
Sure.
It's such a disconnect to me.
Yeah.
It's such a, because like, look at, sorry, this is my rant, I guess.
Please,
look
no,
at the stars,
go off. Yeah.
Like around the NBA now, they didn't just become that way within their second or third or even fourth season. Yeah. I think it's like the recency of it and like the expectations of it. They've got to like align somewhere that's a lot more comfortable. And when you have like when the team doesn't seem worried, when you have like experts around him that don't seem worried, it's okay. Like you should trust that, and I think everybody should cool it a little bit. So to me, I guess to answer your question, I don't know. I mean, the practicality of it, like he's still on his rookie deal, so I guess like he becomes a bit less untouchable. And it does depend on how the team wants to move him. To me, though, it's like, why would you? I think you need at least 3 seasons to get a good sense of his direction. I mean, even then, like that's me feels like skimping, but I'm not a GM, so.
Yeah, for me, he's very much in the OG Siakam area of this spectrum. I've come up with a different thing to represent where he is on the can't touch this spectrum. He, Katie, to me, is a prickly pear cactus. Are you familiar with these? If you've seen The Green Planet, the wonderful David Attenborough documentary about plants, it's great. There's a desert episode of it, and they talk about the prickly pear cactus. And look, the prickly pear cactus, if you get to the inside, there's just like a delicious treat in there if you can find your way in. Critters are trying to get in there. Evolution has been trying to get critters inside there for years, but evolution has been fighting back because the prickly pear cactus will mess you up. It's got all these pointy guys that are impossible to get through. David Attenborough wears a glove in the episode to pick it up, and it still goes through the glove. It's like a chainmail glove, and it's that potent. That, to me, is the idea of trading Scottie Barnes right now. You do that, you're going to get stabbed by that prickly pear. In theory, maybe, if you were to trade Scottie Barnes for a superstar, you get that delectable fruit in the middle. But odds are that's not going to happen, and you will probably rue the day you traded Scottie Barnes, much like I'm sure David Attenborough rues the day he palmed a prickly pear cactus. So you can't touch that. It's too spiky. Don't do it.
Also, you can't him for a superstar. Like you can't. Like the conversations around him for Durant were a bit deranged because it's still Kevin Durant, right? Like we feel it. Like you're like, no, like the potential, like you don't know what you're, like you could be getting in someone like him. And this is not to like completely go back on everything I said before. The two exist like hand in hand, but like you're not, unless it's a very desperate franchise, which I'm like, why do you want to?
Yeah.
There's good reasons to do trades with franchises like that sometimes, but like for this, I don't really see like you getting a superstar back for just Scottie Barnes, right? Like that's what it is. It's like it gets into the Scottie and a lot of other stuff.
And some of these other untouchable guys, and they can't touch this MC Hammer zone, which you don't want to do. We're going to continue on, Katie, get to some perhaps more touchable guys in just 1 second. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football and college bowl season to basketball. You got club soccer coming back now that the World Cup is in the rear view. Maybe you're hopping on the bandwagon of a team and you want to bet with them as you go through. You can use BetOnline as a great tool to become the informed wagerer as you start to dive into those waters. If you love sports podcasts as well, they have them there too to give you all the information you might need as to why the odds are set the way they are, what is the smart play. You're going to be informed. You're not just going to be throwing your money away at bets that aren't making sense. BetOnline helps you become that educated wagerer, which is something I never ever do, and I'm always just doing it like a fool and not using the resources at hand at BetOnline, but I should. I don't bet enough to really sort of dabble or even know what's going on, but if you are a regular wagerer, BetOnline is going to give you all that information that you need to make the right bets. Head to the website today, use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Katie, we have reached the final segment of the show where we're going to start jettisoning off players now, huh? Let's talk Fred VanVleet, shall we? Of course, It's been a rough go for old Fred this year. The three-point shot has been absent in large part. The defense, I think, has slipped as a point of attack guy. He's still there as the heavy-handed monster who rips balls away from larger men. That's great, but there have been some setbacks, obviously, and frankly, he hasn't quite been the same player since the All-Star break last year when he was hurt. Katie, Furry Wall, MC Hammer. Where does Fred VanVleet slide in on the untouchability scale for the Raptors to you?
Probably in the middle, but I will explain. Like my middle is more because I wonder. It depends. It depends what the makeup of the team is going to be going into the future, right? If Masai and Co are going to keep it with these like tall, long guys, I do think Fred may get, and because if Scottie continues to develop up into potentially like a point guard position, Fred is kind of the middle. I don't want to say stopgap, but like Fred is in the middle now, right? Of that. So that's like what makes me basically wonder if he becomes tradable. There are definitely, I think, teams that could use him.
Sure, 100%. Yeah.
So I can understand how that might be alluring to some people, but I also wonder about the timing. To be super gross and callous, like it's difficult to obviously trade somebody away when they're in the middle of what seems just like to me a shooting slump, bit of a cold streak. Somebody who hasn't necessarily been feeling the best and then comes into this, and I don't know, like I really don't think it's much more than that. Again, like I feel like I say this every time and maybe people are sick of hearing it probably, but it's been like 3 weeks since the team kind of hit this downward slope.
Yeah.
You can get out of that still.
100%.
You'd be more worried about this if it was toward the end of the year. So all that said, like if this kind of stuff continues into like closer to trade deadline territory, yes, I could see them making a move.
Yeah, I think Fred is, unfortunately, like the reality is he's probably going to be on the table at some point just as like a potential trade option because of the contract situation. It's the realities of the NBA and the fact that he has not played this season like the theoretical perfect fit he is around all the tall, long guys, right? Like, I think coming into the year and for the first little bit of the season, even though he was in and out of the lineup, we saw Fred VanVleet when he's hitting his catch and shoot threes, when he's providing solid defense. He is a wonderful complement to the guys they have on the team, especially if they're going to sort of funnel more of the creation burden to Siakam, Barnes, and OG as time goes on. He's a perfect guy to play as a fourth option off of those guys. You have the institutional knowledge we always talk about with him as well. There's a similar sort of Pascal Siakam-like trajectory for him with the team. Siakam, I think, is just a better player, so it feels a little bit more sort of impactful and all that. But, all the stuff I said off the top about Siakam and the reasons why you want to keep a guy like that around, they apply to Fred as well. It just might be that his performance suggests that the Raptors are going to have to make a call. And I don't have like a firm idea of how untouchable I think he is right now. I think I'll sort of say, let's wait and see a month or a month and a half and see where things sit. Because if he kind of responds and bounces back to the player we kind of know he can be, then no, I think he is pretty untouchable because he is a really good piece around the core group. And my sort of thing all along has been the problem is not with the good players, it's that there aren't enough of them. And to trade another one of the good players, if he kind of bounces back to that, feels like you're kind of taking away from the solution as opposed to fixing the problem. And so for me, I guess, if I'm going to do a dumb comparison for this silly exercise I've concocted, to me, he's like untouchable, like a candle, like a burning candle wick is, in that you probably don't want to touch it. It's going to be really painful if you do it. You could touch it in theory, and like once you do it, the pain will probably dissipate relatively quickly. You might have a little blister or a burn. But like if you touch it, it's not going to be pleasant, but it might be a necessary thing to prevent a fire. I don't know. I lost the plot.
Keep going.
Yeah, he's a burning the candle, a holiday candle wick, and that's where I'm at as on the can't touch this ranking for him. let's kind of rapid fire through the rest of the guys, because this is where, truthfully, I feel like if there are going to be trades, they're going to come from this next sort of group of guys on the team. You've got Gary Trent Jr., you've got Thad Young, you've got Khem Birch, you've got Chris Boucher, Otto Porter Jr., I suppose, as well. These guys, just based on the realities of NBA trades, have salaries to match and all of this. Of those group, is there like a guy or two who maybe interest you the most and who you have a comfortable feeling of where they slot in on the can't touch this to furry wall range?
I think Otto and Thad, probably you want to keep those guys if you can.
Yeah.
Otto, because like you haven't seen anything of why you
and when you did see him, he was really helpful.
He was right. It was exactly why you wanted him on the team. I think that is great. Like, I think there's a lot of benefits to having a guy like Thad Young around that you're not seeing on the court, obviously, as a vet. Gary, I waffle with, because you've really seen him dig in. So to me, it's just like, okay, if you see someone respond to the thing they've been asked to do, and I know like he's got his contract coming up. So that's probably the only reason why I think maybe he sees himself as more furry wall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Potentially. You didn't have Malachi in there. I think he's got to be, it sucks, but I do feel like he'd probably be included in something.
Yeah, I guess you need a team to want him.
Well, that's why I feel like it would
mean,
be many.
but...
Yeah, I hate talking about this stuff. That's why I feel like it would be like a few people, right? Like in the deal. So
yeah.
But I think like when you get into this tier, and it's like Fred said this himself like the other night, it's just like they are not constructed in a way where they can be without people.
Yeah.
Like they can't be out, even like they can't be out two guys, let alone the amount of guys they've had out.
Which speaks to why the front office is actually the real furry wall here. Get rid of them. No, I can't. I'm kidding.
Yeah, like I think Boucher is probably close. I think it feels a bit redundant because I think the names that seem close to touchable are the ones we've talked about before, and I think seem pretty clear to everybody. I think it's like, how do you construct that trade then, and who are you going after in return?
I think for me, the guy who over the course, I agree, like Gary Trent Jr. has kind of been in furry wall zone, I think, all season long, just because the contract situation, because he is clearly not on the same level as like the guys we've talked about as being untouchables, right? Like there's a difference there in terms of overall quality of play and all that. I think the guy who's kind of migrated from untouchable or sort of middle of it to more furry wall range is Chris Boucher to me. I think he, just because of the mere fact that he has a big salary, which again, sucks that this is the way we talk about it, but it's just the way it works in the NBA, so you have to. Like, he's got a pretty substantial number, and I just kind of keep on feeling, Katie, like, if you just replaced his minutes with Bojan Bogdanovic, or just like someone a little bit more traditional who can shoot, address the creation issues a little bit, I feel like as much as Boucher is really effective, because he's, fourth or fifth on the list of 6'9" guys on the team, I feel like maybe there's a bit of redundancy there at times. And if you were to sort of swap him out for someone who offers something a little bit different as far as the package they bring to the floor, and you attach a first round pick or something, I do feel like that is actually like a pretty meaningful way for the Raptors to upgrade their roster and kind of address some of their holes, especially if you keep on having Thad play the way he has, if you get Porter back. I think they have enough size to sort of hang even without Chris Boucher, who's really, really effective at his best. But boy, oh boy, Katie, the missed threes from him right now are feeling so cataclysmic whenever they happen, because they're always so wide open because no one's worried about them. They always come off like a beautiful Pascal Siakam pass, and they always brick. And, he hit the one really sort of impressive one in the game against the Sixers, but he's shooting 28% from three, and that can't be understated as a problem on this team. And so I think he's kind of moved closer to the furry wall zone for me. Let's quickly go to Nick Nurse, Katie, before we round out the show. I think coming into the season, people would have thought Nick Nurse, full on MC Hammer zone. You can't touch this. He's really good. He's got he's got it figured out how to win a lot of games and milk the most he can out of whatever he's given roster wise and all of this. Things I think have gone a little bit more shifty towards the other end. I don't know how far, but Katie, where are you at right now with Nick Nurse and his untouchability?
I mean, I think he's untouchable to the organization. I'll say that.
I think that's fair, yeah.
Does it warrant a conversation of like, maybe they're probably having these already in terms of direction and maybe a retooling or a let's pause and let's like have an honest conversation about where we're all at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's still firmly in that territory.
Yeah, I think, if you ask the front office, their answer would be Zubaz zone, full on.
I mean, their answer would be they'd hang up on you. Their answer would be to shut the door in your face.
Masai, let me ask you a question, a reportedly question, huh?
No, actually,
where would you rank Nick Nurse on the range of Furry Wall to MC Hammer?
Well, I have actually been wondering.
What?
Amit Man at Yahoo said this, but like I think it was last year when the team was in a bit of a slump that Masai did a presser. I mean, it's just kind of like an optics check, right?
Yeah, it doesn't change anything.
No, but he wondered if it's time for that. Maybe I also think that's a bit of a they've got to get a bit worse before something like that happens. But theoretically, if you asked him in that, he would say Nick has the full trust of our organization.
I think you're totally right. I do think I struggle with this, Katie. We were talking about this off air before. We can bring it to the pod. I really struggle with the idea of moving on from Nick Nurse and then getting to a playoff game and wishing, damn, it'd be nice to have Nick Nurse kind of figuring this one out. Because he is really good at that. Like, you can't deny it. He's really good at in-game adjustments and winning a game when you have to win a game and finding the way forward for a team within the context of a 48-minute span. That's a real strength of his, undeniable, and it's what Raptors fans were longing for the entire Dwayne Casey era, where it was inverse. Dwayne Casey, master of the regular season, rolled the same 10 guys every night, 82 games in a row. Nobody tried anything different. They had no variability in the way they played, but boy, did they succeed in the regular season and get rest for their stars and all this stuff. But you get to the playoffs, and it just wasn't there. I suppose you need to get to the playoffs for this to be a thing to worry about with your head coach and to, have it be a value skill to win playoff games and have the sort of the wherewithal to navigate them. But it does freak me out, the idea of maybe the grass not being greener, especially when it comes to sort of winning at the highest level, because I think Nick Nurse, as much as you can quibble with a lot of the stuff he does, he's really good at that one thing, and that might be the most important thing for a head coach to be. So it's tricky. Yeah. Any last parting shots here, Katie, on the untouchability of the Toronto Raptors, other than this was kind of a gross exercise? I tried to paint it with like a nice veneer of a stupid concept, but it's not fun to talk about this stuff, Katie, but we got to talk about it because the freaks, the sickos are circling, and it just won't be stopped. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry to the sickos, but I really think this is still like a fantasy exercise. I really do. I hesitate. I hesitate to see a world in which, if things do not go drastically worse, any of this happening.
Yeah. I also, maybe this is just me being dumb, wearing rose-colored glasses, whatever. I feel like you could do nothing and this team will still probably win like 45 games. Like there's a lot here. They just won 48 a year ago. They were in a similar position early in the season in December before going on a run. I don't think it's all that nuts to suggest that there's still something to tap into here as far as like a legitimate Eastern Conference playoff team. And while that might not satiate those who wanted an improvement over last season, I still think making the playoffs is a valuable thing to do. And it's not all linear. It's the Scottie Barnes thing again. It's not always going to happen the way you want it to in the progression you want it to. Sometimes it's going to take a longer time. There's going to be detours and stuff like that. And I would hesitate to ship guys off before getting a real sort of look at this team with something resembling full health or whatever. It just, I don't know. It's Can they just win tonight, Katie? Please, just beat the Knicks. I know it's impossible to beat the Knicks right now, but please, just beat the Knicks. And I feel like a lot of the concerns will wither away over the holidays. Anything you'd like to promote here, Katie, before we get out of here? Any Christmas movies you want to promote?
I mean, I've been rewatching Lord of the Rings. That's a Christmas series to me.
Notable Christmas film, yes.
Yeah, that's like what I'm getting into.
Hell yeah.
I'm not like a Home Alone like, that's more of like, maybe my family will want to watch that when we're all together, but then I'll probably fall asleep halfway. Like there's some movies that it's like, like It's a Wonderful Life. My dad's got to watch that movie 100%. So maybe we'll watch it, but he's probably watched it already.
Sure.
So yeah, my reco's not so good.
Yeah. We watched Home Alone 2. Hey, it's a pretty good movie recommendation. One of the best of all time. Can I recommend Jurassic Park while we're at the thing of good movies that we're watching lately? I watch Muppet Christmas Carol. That's my endorsement. Oh, yeah. It's the best telling of Christmas Carol. The songs are great. The Scrooge song is awesome. Feels like Christmas. The Ghost of Christmas Present. It's all lovely. Go watch that and go subscribe to all of our great stuff. Basketball Feelings for Katie. I pointed the wrong way on the camera. Basketball Feelings for Katie. Twitter for me at Woodley Sean.
Next week, because if not, then I'll have to promote something.
We'll do an ep next week.
Okay, never mind.
Cool. All right. Unless you don't want to. It's the holidays. You can choose not to. It's your call.
We can do it.
Excellent. We'll do that. All right. With that, we'll round it out. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go make your second listen of the day. Locked On Sports Today with Pete Bukowski. Really biggest stories in all the sports world, broken down in 22 digestible minutes. So you can be the smart person about the sports at your water cooler. Go check that out wherever you get your shows. Same goes for this podcast. Apps for the audio stuff. YouTube, I guess, is also an app for the video side of things and all that. We'll be back again tomorrow to hopefully discuss the end of the losing streak against the damn New York Knicks. We will get into that on tomorrow's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.